Hello, and welcome. In this video, I will be talking about the current and possible future state of power creep, how likely your character is to be power crept, going over the negative effects as well as the positive benefits. Power creep is when new, more powerful characters, weapons, or other features are added to a game, making previously powerful characters relatively less powerful. Some examples of power creep are Natasha being power crept by Locha, Bailu with Ho-Ho, Serval with Jingyuan, Goku with this version of Goku with this version of Goku, Danheng with Danheng, and Hunt with Destruction. Okay, I think you get the idea now. So the first and most major negative is having your favorite character power crept by a new character. This just feels bad. And it feels even worse the more you invested into that character. May it be using all your free-to-play currency on their signature light cones, or eidolons, or even your hard-earned money on these characters. But it's not all doom and gloom here. To counter this point, I come to my first positive in favor of power creep. Yes, your favorite is no longer S+ tier. But what if there was a new character coming out, a brand new shiny character that you wanted? Doesn't it feel amazing knowing that this new character you are about to spend your precious jade on will also be one of the best characters in the game? I'm guessing it probably would. And without power creep, I don't think it would feel nearly as good to roll for a new character, knowing it's just as good or even worse than characters you already have on your account. Before I go over the other negatives and positives, I want to tangent off for a bit and go over the path system, and how this system adds complexity on how they approach the power creeping situation. And I'm going to divide these paths up into 3 tiers of what I'm calling power creep ability. In the first tier, we have the preservation and abundance paths. These paths' main role and priority are to keep your team alive and to do so without the help of anyone else, making them what many would refer to as a solo sustainer. Currently, we need 2 of them, one for each group in Memory of Chaos. And once we have 2 good solo sustainers, we should theoretically be done with these paths. Because if they are doing their job of keeping your team alive, why even roll for new preservation or abundance units? This is something MiHoYo is very aware of. Let's take a quick look at an example of a preservation unit that power crept the previous ones. For preservation, we started out with the free units March 7th, who can shield one target and do very minimal healing at a high eidolon level. Fire MC, who barely can shield the team. And finally, the permanent banner character Jeopard, who does a decent job of shielding, but that's about it. All 3 of these characters don't hold a candle to the latest preservation character, Fu Xuan. Fu Xuan makes your team unable to be one-shot. She tanks a ton of damage and can heal herself massively. And on top of all of that, she provides a crit buff and prevents your team from being CC'd. This seems like a huge power creep from what we had before, and I can only imagine what the next preservation unit will bring. But if I had to guess the trend for both of these paths going forward, it would be throwing in a form of harmony buff along with making their solo sustainability amazing. Like we have with the newest abundance character, Ho-Ho, whose heal scaling is absolutely amazing while also providing an energy and attack buff for your whole team. In my second tier, we have the paths of Destruction, Hunt, and Erudition. These are our DPS paths. They are in charge of essentially killing things. This is also the tier of units who I feel MiHoYo made a bit of a mistake with, and we can expect to see a revamp on DPS characters going forward. Let me explain a bit on this. Let's go back in time. Let's call this time BD for Before Dragon. Everything was going fine for this tier. We had Sela, Blade, and Jingyuan. And then one day, Danheng, a Hunt character, decided, I'm going to be Destruction, and I'm going to be the best there ever was. Not only in DPS, but also in every other path's supposed niche. Erudition, the best AoE. Dan was like, nah dude, I'm the best. The Hunt, supposedly the best damage dealer for elite enemies. Dan is again like, nah dude, my AoE is so good that it's even doing better than you on a single target. No wonder March 7th conveniently forgot to invite Dan to the Belobog Festival. This guy just doesn't let anyone else shine, and she wanted to show off her new dress. And then we had Jingliu right after, who is on the same level and thus now raising the standard of destruction units from here on out. So how do you power creep this? Well, of course you could just increase the damage again, but what's the point? At this point in time, those characters are able to zero cycle the hardest content in the game. Which brings me to my second negative of power creep, the trivialization of in-game difficulty. If any of you have played Genshin Impact, you are very familiar with this. The first few months of the game's life, I would argue, if you didn't wail, the content had a decent challenge. But after some time, new and more powerful characters were introduced, and you were able to take on anything and everything the game threw at you. This may seem fun at first, but gets really boring fast. This trivialization of in-game difficulty not only affects you, but also the developer of the game. For them, they are walking a fine line of trying to get you to pull for new characters, while also trying to keep you engaged in their game with challenges for you to overcome. Now this brings me back to Honkai Star Rail, and back to how MiHoYo will power creep the DPS tier of units going forward. We are just over 6 months in, and we have had so much power creep that people are zero cycling the hardest content in the game. But unlike Genshin, Honkai Star Rail has addressed this and stated that they are going to be adding in new, harder floors to Memory of Chaos, as well as adding in a whole new endgame system. We will probably now see the damage profiles of the DPS paths going forward roughly stay at the Dan Heng and Jingliu levels, but skew much more towards their originally intended niche. We should be able to see hunt characters able to out DPS destruction on single target fights, and we should see Erudition characters getting close to destruction on AoE damage, but without the negative drawbacks that come with destruction units, like using many skill points or doing self-damage. With there being 2 endgame modes soon, we may see a larger variety of single versus AoE DPS focused fights, increasing the need for a variety of DPS. So the positive I take away from this is, power creep has caused the Honkai Star Rail devs to work on and improve endgame systems. And they should continue to do so, because when it comes to DPS characters, you can only keep their power levels the same for so long without needing to increase it, so people would want new ones. So I see this as a win-win. We get more endgame, more content, and also a reason to want to keep pulling for more powerful characters. Now for my final tier of units, which paths consist of Harmony and Nihility, whose main focus is to buff your party and debuff the enemies, and what I feel will be the least likely to be power crept, and here's why. First, before I go into my explanation, I'm going to subdivide Nihility into 2 categories. The first being true debuffers, such as Pela with her defense shred, Welt with his enemy speed reduction, and Silverwolf with adding her weakness and all type resistance reduction to enemies. The second type of Nihility are dot appliers, and I will lump them into the DPS tier from before. Okay, so how has MiHoYo power crept these paths? Well, they haven't really. These paths have such a large variety of options in buffs and debuffs that it's so easy to have these characters be very unique, making it difficult to draw a direct comparison line between them. When it comes to Harmony units, we usually see them buffing more than one stat. Asta has attack and speed buffs. Tingyun has attack and energy regen. Yukong has attack and crit rate and damage buffs. And Bronya has damage, crit damage, and advanced forward buffs. So I don't think we will have a direct comparison or power creep for these units, or at least not anytime in the near future. But we will have ones that work better than others depending on the units you have on your team. So for example, Dan Heng in Biber Lune, who eats skill points, could benefit from a skill point generator battery like the new unit Hanya. Or if you have a double DPS slow team setup, they could benefit from Asta quite well, especially if one or both are fire units. This also applies to the debuffer Nihility types. We could see more specific debuffs, like a massive fire resist down, or for those hunt characters out there, a debuff that makes a certain amount of damage done to the target explode onto surrounding characters. So, to quickly recap, power creep in gacha games are here to stay. It feels bad to have your favorite character power crept. It feels great to get a new unit who is the best in the game. Power creep can also trivialize the game, but can cause developers to improve and build new, harder endgame systems, so that they can eventually create more power creep. Okay, that is all for this video. If you liked it, please subscribe. And I wish you the best of luck on your 50/50s.